Hello, my name is Layla. During dinner, my sister shoved me so hard I hit the floor, and my knee shattered. But what broke me wasn't the pain. It was my mother, leaning in to whisper, "Stay quiet, she has a future." And my father, he didn't even look up, just muttered, "No drama." That night, I limped out alone. No apology. No help. Just silence. But what if that wasn't the first time they erased me? What if they'd been preparing to erase me my entire life? They took the house, they rewrote the story, and they didn't think I'd ever fight back. Would you? The invitation had said dinner at 7, but by the time I pulled into my parents' long driveway in Travis Heights, it was already pushing 7:18 p.m. I parked under the elm tree, where I always used to leave my car growing up, and sat still for a moment. The windows of the house were glowing, the familiar golden light pouring out onto the perfectly manicured front lawn. I could already imagine the hum of conversations, the clinking of wine glasses, and the click of my mother's heels across the marble floors. I glanced down at the cake on the passenger seat, German chocolate from scratch. I'd stayed up the night before finishing it, despite being on my feet all day at the clinic. Sable's favorite, or at least it had been when we were kids. I thought it might mean something if I brought it. When I finally walked through the front door, the scent of rosemary and roasted chicken hit me first. My mother was talking loudly in the kitchen, her voice smooth and bright like a TV anchor. Sable's laugh chimed in from the dining room, perfectly timed, as if she was trained to laugh only at the right decibel. "Layla," Mom said, noticing me with a tilt of her head. "You made it." She didn't move toward me, didn't reach out, just observed like she was checking off an item on a guest list. "I brought cake," I said, lifting the box slightly, a hesitant smile tugging at my mouth. "Oh, how sweet," she said, already turning away. "We already have dessert, sweetie, but I'll just tuck this away for later." As I followed her to the kitchen, I watched her slide the box onto a side counter next to a tray of untouched macarons. That cake wouldn't see daylight tonight. I should have known. The dining room was buzzing. My father stood at the far end, a glass of red wine in his hand, speaking with one of Sable's non-profit board members. He glanced up, caught my eye for a second, then looked past me as though I were someone's plus one. "Sis!" Sable's voice was warm and bright, but I recognized the performative edge in it. She was glowing, draped in a pale blue wrap dress, hair curled, lashes done. The woman who once borrowed my clothes and begged me to do her algebra homework now looked like someone off a magazine cover. "I'm so glad you made it," she said, and leaned in for an air kiss that never really landed. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, forcing a smile. I scanned the table. Sable's place was dead center, flanked by Mom and Dad. The seats nearby were occupied. Some family, some of her donors, some community figures. I moved toward the far end, hoping to find a spot near someone familiar. "Oh, Layla," Mom called out. "We saved you a seat, just over there, next to the hallway." I turned to look. It was the chair closest to the guest bathroom. Literally, the end of the table. Not even a place setting, just a napkin folded beside a water glass. No one around me was talking. I sat down slowly, adjusting my skirt under the chair, willing myself not to make a face. The thing is, it wasn't the seat, it was the message. I'd come from work, still smelling faintly of antiseptic, with a small bruise on my wrist from lifting a patient. I hadn't had time to change. I brought a cake I knew wouldn't be served, and now I was tucked away like the cousin nobody really knows. When the toasts began, I tried to disappear into the linen. My father raised his glass first. "To Sable," he said, with that CEO voice that had sold condos and closed deals for years, "for reminding us all what true community leadership looks like." Applause. Next came her donor, then someone from her board, and then Mom stood, clutching a crystal glass. "From the moment she was born, I knew she was meant for something big," she said, eyes damp and shiny. Sable was never afraid to take up space. People nodded, in agreement. I waited. A beat. Then, when the lull came, I tried to speak. "I remember when we did that cleanup at Barton Springs, Sable and I were—" "Oh, that was years ago," Sable cut in smoothly, chuckling. "Layla's always had a good heart. She just never liked the spotlight. The room laughed. I blinked. Just once. That's all it took. One sentence to reduce me from participant to accessory, from sister to backdrop. My wine stayed full. I hadn't touched it. Later, during dessert, as slices of perfectly plated tiramisu were passed around, I watched the swing door to the kitchen flap open slightly. The cake box was still there, unopened, pushed beside the paper towels. My gaze wandered back to the table. My mother was beaming, nodding at Sable's every word like she was testifying in church. My father leaned in with pride, laughing at some quip I didn't hear. I shifted in my chair, the cushion creaking softly beneath me. No one noticed. Sable raised her glass. "To legacy," she said. "To legacy," they echoed. I looked down at my hands. I didn't lift my glass. I could feel the words rising inside me, burning in the back of my throat, pounding behind my ribs. But I didn't say them. Not yet. I hadn't planned to speak. I hadn't even planned to stay long. But the words came anyway. It started small. A comment about transparency. Something I read in a local article regarding Sable's nonprofit. It wasn't even an accusation, more like an observation. "I think it's important to be open about where donations go," I'd said, reaching for the bread basket, trying to sound neutral, casual, like I wasn't already on the edge of imploding. The air shifted immediately. You know that feeling when every eye in the room turns toward you, but no one says a word. That's what it was. A pressure drop. The hum of conversation screeched to a halt behind thin smiles and frozen forks. Sable stood. It was quick, too quick to register as anything but instinct. She pushed back her chair, the legs scraping against the hardwood like a threat, and walked toward me. There was something in her face, tight, practiced control clashing with something darker. She didn't say a word. "Sable," I started, holding my hands up slightly. "I'm just saying. Accountability matters. That's all." Her eyes didn't blink. Not once. Then she shoved me. It wasn't playful. It wasn't one of those get-out-of-here nudges siblings sometimes do. No, this was forceful, calculated. I lost my balance. My heel slipped on the tile just outside the rug line under the dining table, and the next thing I knew, I was falling. The crack of my knee against the floor echoed like a thunderclap through the room. I didn't scream immediately. Shock does that. But then the pain came, hot and sharp, radiating up my leg in waves. I gasped. My vision blurred. Someone dropped a fork. A chair scraped. I heard my name, maybe, but no one moved. No one. I clutched my knee, feeling heat, then something wet through the fabric of my pants. It wasn't just a bruise, I knew it. I didn't need an X-ray to recognize the level of pain. Something was fractured. Deep. Sable stood above me, her hands trembling just slightly. "She slipped," she said, her voice too loud, too fast. "I didn't mean, she slipped." Mom appeared at my side. I thought, maybe, for a second, she was going to help me up. Instead, she crouched down, her perfume invading my lungs, and whispered harshly into my ear, "Stay quiet. She has a future. Don't ruin this." I froze. That was it. That was all she had to say. No concern. No call for help. Just that. Protect the image. Protect the golden child, not the girl bleeding on the floor. I looked toward my dad. He was still seated, watching the scene like it was a mild inconvenience during a long flight. He didn't move, didn't raise his voice, just muttered under his breath without making eye contact. "No drama." That phrase, I've heard it my entire life. Don't cry, Layla. Don't complain. Don't ruin the moment. Don't be the one who makes everything messy. I tried to stand, but my leg collapsed under me. The pain sent a fresh bolt of nausea up my spine. I choked on the air, desperate for someone, anyone, to move. I think she needs help," someone said near the end of the table. A guest, a stranger. "She's sensitive," Mom replied without missing a beat. "She'll be fine." I was not fine. I crawled, hand over hand across the tile to the kitchen counter. I used the cabinet handle to pull myself upright, the weight on my good leg making me dizzy. I heard whispers behind me, Awkward laughs, the clinking of plates as dessert resumed. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't grab the cake. I limped out the side door without a word, feeling heat bloom behind my eyes, but refusing to let a single tear fall. The porch light was still on as I made my way to my car, the gravel biting into my shoes. My legs screamed with each step. I could barely bend it as I climbed in and slammed the door. I sat there for a while, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, the cake box still in the passenger seat, unopened, untouched, just like me. It was quiet in the car, too quiet. And in that silence, something broke. Not my knee, not just that, but something deeper. Something I had been holding together for years. I started the engine. As I drove through the winding streets of the neighborhood, my mind buzzed with everything that had just happened. I wanted to scream, to cry, to turn the car around and force someone, anyone, to acknowledge the insanity of what I'd just endured. But I didn't. Halfway home, the pain became unbearable. A stabbing sensation every time the car hit the slightest bump. My breathing got shallow. I pulled over near an empty park, barely managing to throw the gear into park before curling forward with my head against the wheel. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slick with sweat. I unlocked it, pulled up my hospital's direct line, but I didn't press call. Instead, I opened the voice memo app. My thumb hovered for a second, and then I hit record. I need to say this somewhere, because if I stay quiet again, I won't survive myself. The voice memo still played on my phone as I drove slowly through the quiet streets. My voice, tired, hoarse, but steady, echoed through the car's speakers. I let it loop once, then I saved it. Not because it was poetic or brave, but because I needed proof that I'd said it, finally. Once I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I sat there, parked in the driveway, engine off, one hand resting on my bandaged knee. The pain medication had dulled the worst of it, but every throb reminded me that something wasn't just bruised, it was broken. And yet, that wasn't what truly ached. What haunted me wasn't Sable's push, or even the silence of that dinner table. It was the memory that had crept up on me the moment I pressed record, a memory I hadn't thought about in years. Maybe because I'd forced myself to forget. I was 7. It was the last day of school before summer, and we'd had a little awards ceremony in the gym. Nothing major, just a ribbon for Most Improved Reader. I remember clinging to it like it was gold. Mom said she'd pick me up at noon. By 12:15, I was the last kid on the bench outside. By 12:45, the janitor came by and asked if someone was coming. By 1:30, I stopped answering. When Mom finally arrived at nearly 2, she was wearing sunglasses and sipping an iced coffee. She didn't say sorry. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just said, "You could have walked to the front office. Don't make this into a thing. You're fine." But I wasn't fine. I sat there with my ribbon crushed in my palm and thought, this is what it means to be forgotten on purpose. Not because they didn't know I was there, but because they didn't care enough to remember. That was the day I started learning how to disappear politely. Now, all these years later, I was starting to wonder how many other things I'd accepted just because no one else noticed. After about 15 minutes, I finally forced myself out of the car, limped up the walkway, and let myself into the apartment. I dropped my keys on the counter, toed off my shoes, and collapsed on the couch. The cake I brought to the party was still in the back seat, probably sweating under the dome of plastic wrap. I didn't care. I didn't turn on the lights. The room was dim, but it matched my mood. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator. I pulled out my phone, not intending to check anything, just out of habit. But the first thing that popped up was a notification from Instagram. Sable's organization had posted photos from the gala. I tapped it, knowing I shouldn't. A grid of carefully filtered images loaded. Sable beaming in her award dress, posing with city council members, donors, family friends. My parents, arm in arm, smiling like nothing had ever gone wrong in their lives. I kept scrolling. There was a post thanking all the volunteers and contributors. Names listed out in a fancy serif font, overlaid on a pale blue background that matched Sable's dress. Mine wasn't there, not even a tag. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to, letting the bitterness settle like dust in my chest. It wasn't about being mentioned, it was about being erased. I had shown up, I had helped set up chairs, I had brought the damn cake, and they edited me out like I was a blemish on their perfect night. My phone buzzed again. Another post, more applause, more celebration. I tossed it onto the cushion beside me and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I traced the same mental line I always traced when things went wrong. It's not that big of a deal. You're overreacting. Just move on. But this time, I didn't believe myself. The pattern was clear now. Left behind at school, placed next to the bathroom at dinner, shoved to the ground in front of an entire room, and told to stay quiet because someone else's future mattered more than my present pain. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a system, a script, one I'd been reading from without realizing it. They made sure Sable shined. They made sure I stayed in the shadows. And every time I tried to step into the light, I was told to sit down and be grateful. I reached for my phone again and opened the voice memo app. I hit record. They won't say my name, I whispered, but I'm about to make sure they can't forget it. I didn't know what I meant by that yet. But I knew I meant it. For the first time in a long time, my silence felt like a choice I no longer had to make. A few minutes later, as I sat on the couch nursing my knee and sipping ginger tea, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Mom. Rest. Don't overthink. Let's move past this. Like it was a scratch, a scab, something I could cover with a bandage and forget. I stared at the message for a full minute, then deleted it. I scrolled to my contacts, paused over a familiar name. Dr. Hayes. I pressed call. The line connected after 2 rings. I could hear the faint hum of an office air conditioning unit, then the calm, grounded voice of Dr. Hayes. Layla? She said, not surprised, just steady. I saw your name pop up and figured something had happened. I hesitated for a second too long. I need to come in. Are you in pain right now? Yes, but not just physical. Come first thing tomorrow. I'll shift my schedule. Just be here at 9. I didn't say thank you. I didn't have it in me. I just whispered, okay, and hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. Not well, anyway. My knee throbbed beneath the ice pack. I tried to distract myself by watching old sitcom reruns, but every laugh track felt like a reminder of the night before. The forced chuckles at the table when Sable diminished me in front of a room full of people. The false warmth, the curated affection. At 8:15 a.m., I left my apartment and drove slowly, carefully to Dr. Hayes's clinic. The streets were just beginning to stir, the sun angling in through the windshield as if nothing had happened at all. But something had, something big. I was early, and the waiting room was still quiet, the receptionist setting up the coffee station when I limped in. She recognized me and greeted me kindly, but didn't ask questions. A small mercy. Dr. Hayes came out a few minutes later, her white coat open over a navy blouse, a soft expression in her eyes. Come on back, she said. We didn't speak as she guided me to the exam room and helped me onto the table. Her movements were slow, careful, respectful. She didn't touch me until she asked. After a few stretches and rotations that made me wince, she stepped back and crossed her arms, reading the pain on my face. We'll do some scans, she said. But I can tell you right now, this isn't just a sprain. I nodded. She looked at me again, not just at my knee, but all of me. Layla, she said gently. Can you tell me what happened? My hands gripped the edges of the exam table. The truth perched just behind my teeth, burning. I didn't launch into it. I didn't cry or vent or dramatize. I just said, my sister pushed me. She was angry. The words felt foreign, sharp, but real. Dr. Hayes's eyes didn't widen. Her voice didn't change. She simply said, "You're safe now." And somehow, that did more than the ice, more than the painkillers. It broke something open. I didn't want to say anything, I admitted. They'll twist it, make me look like I'm exaggerating. Layla, she said softly, you did the hard part already. You told the truth. She paused, then added, and as your physician, I'm legally required to report this. It's not optional. My heart dropped. Can't we wait? Just until I talk to them first? You don't owe them a warning, she said firmly. And frankly, delaying this could put you at risk of further harm. You made a brave choice today. Let's not backpedal. I looked away. They're going to say I did this for attention. Of course they are, she said. Because admitting the truth means tearing down the myth they've built. She turned toward her computer, started entering notes. And Layla, she added without looking back, you're not the one tearing it down. It's already cracking. And you're just refusing to keep patching it. She picked up the phone. While she made the call, I sat in silence, watching the sunlight inch across the exam room floor. Something about that moment, about finally letting someone else see behind the curtain, made me feel taller despite sitting down. The appointment wrapped up. She gave me a brace, stronger medication, and a follow-up plan. I thanked her with a nod that didn't feel big enough. On the drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. My mind was too loud already. I was barely inside my apartment, brace still tight, phone in my hand, when the first call came. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. Marceline, how could you do this to your sister? Do you have any idea what this looks like? Call me back, now. More came in over the next hour, from unknown numbers, mutual friends, Sable's assistant. But the one that told me everything I needed to know came from the house itself. While I sat on my couch, bracing myself for whatever would come next, 2 officers stood on my parents' front porch. I know this because I got a screenshot from an acquaintance who lived down the street. She sent a message with the photo. Is everything okay? The police are at your mom and dad's place. I stared at it. Then I smiled. Inside that house, I could picture the scene like a stage play. The door opens. Marceline answers, her robe pressed, makeup subtle, but camera ready just in case. Oh my, she says. There must be some mistake. The officer speaks calmly. We received a report of a domestic incident. We're here to gather information. Of course, she replies, her voice lowering. There's a misunderstanding. My daughter Layla. She has a vivid imagination. She's always been dramatic. She bruises easily. At this point, she offers them tea. Sable comes downstairs, her face composed, but her energy brittle. She slipped, she says. I barely touched her. The officer raises an eyebrow, writing this down. Lawrence, my father, remains quiet, as always. He stands behind them, a hand in his pocket, watching, saying nothing, but he hears everything. She's just doing this because she can't stand that I've made something of myself. Sable finally snaps, her voice cracking. She's always wanted to be me. I don't know how long the officers stayed. I don't know what they wrote down or what they saw or didn't see. But I know the truth was now on record, and it hadn't come from a whisper behind closed doors. It had come from me. I looked at my phone again. 10 unread messages. I didn't open a single one. I closed my eyes and deleted them all. I didn't sleep that night, but I wasn't restless. It was more like something had clicked into place, like my body had finally accepted that this wasn't a misunderstanding, a temporary storm I just had to wait out. It was deliberate. They chose this. By morning, my inbox had filled with noise, news alerts, appointment confirmations, even a reminder for a dental cleaning I'd forgotten about, but one email stood out. Subject: Insurance update, estate review. I opened it, assuming it was spam or some routine policy notice. But the name of the law firm in the header was familiar. My parents' estate attorney. I'd dealt with him a few years back when Dad had me listed as secondary beneficiary on the property insurance for the house. The family house. The one I was told would eventually be mine. The message was brief, a request to confirm updated insurance documentation reflecting the current title holder. I blinked. That phrase, current title holder. I clicked through the attached documents and saw it, plain and unceremonious. Owner, Sable M. Harrington, not Lawrence, not jointly with Mom, just Sable. I stared at the screen. The transfer date was nearly 6 months ago. A few days after that family dinner, where Mom assured me everything was fair and everyone gets their moment. I hadn't asked for the house. I didn't beg for it. But I was told for years, in subtle, manipulative little drips, that it was the plan. I was the one who still lived nearby, the one who fixed the broken fence when Dad was recovering from surgery, the one who paid for their house cleaner when Mom needed a break. Now it was hers. Quietly, without a word to me. I didn't cry. That part of me felt dried up now. Instead, I opened another window and pulled up the county records. I needed to see it from a second source. I needed it to feel real. And there it was. Transfer of ownership filed electronically. No signatures from me required. Just a few clicks and a notary. I closed the laptop, got up, made coffee. By the time I made it to Dr. Hayes' office for my follow-up, I'd decided I wouldn't mention it. Not yet. I needed to keep control of the pace, my rhythm. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was moving with purpose now. Dr. Hayes came in with her usual no-nonsense presence and gestured for me to sit. "Your scans confirm it. 2 fractures," she said, flipping through a tablet. "One clean, the other hairline. You're going to need therapy and time. A lot of both." "I figured," I said. She studied my face. "You're too calm. That concerns me." I exhaled slowly. "I'm focused." She nodded once. "Good. Because you'll need that." She paused, then added, "Also, your mother called me." I turned to face her fully. "She left a message, Doctor." Hayes continued, "Said you've always had a tendency to dramatize pain, that perhaps we could refrain from anything that might follow Sable into her professional records." My stomach twisted. "She said that?" I asked, voice low. Dr. Hayes nodded. "I thought you should know." I felt the heat in my chest rise. Not panic, not fear. Just this growing, boiling burn that made my teeth clench. "I already filed the report," she said. "It's on record. No one gets to erase what happened to you. Not this time." I gave her a tight nod. "Thank you." After the appointment, I sat in my car outside her office for a long while. The fall air was crisp, the kind that wakes you up whether you want it to or not. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I hadn't tapped in days. "Marceline," I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. "Well," she said, her voice instantly tight. "I assume you've seen what your little stunt caused." I didn't let her continue. "You went behind my back. You gave her the house, the one you promised me." "Oh, don't be dramatic," she replied, letting out a sharp breath. "It's a house, Layla. Walls and paint. You want to throw away your relationship with this family over square footage?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm throwing it away over betrayal." Silence. Then she spoke again, voice suddenly saccharine. "Sweetheart, don't ruin the family over a bruise." I almost laughed. "A bruise?" I echoed. "Sable didn't just bruise my knee. She shattered the silence that's protected you all for years." "You're being unfair," she snapped. "No," I said. "I'm being precise." I hung up, not out of rage, but because the conversation was over. Had been for years, really. This was just me finally realizing it. An hour later, as I sat back at home with an ice pack and my laptop, a notification popped up. Sable had made her Instagram account public again. And she was clearing the air. I clicked, already knowing what I'd find. She'd posted a series of curated slides, a black and white selfie with red puffy eyes, a quote about family cutting deepest, and a long caption filled with vague phrases like misunderstood intentions and protecting my peace. One sentence stood out. "Sometimes the people closest to you try to destroy you because they're lost in their own pain." I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. She was laying the foundation of her defense, turning herself into the victim. Not this time. I opened my laptop. I began drafting a complaint, not just about the assault, but about the public defamation, the campaign to paint me as unstable, petty, jealous. Every sentence I wrote came from memory, not malice. I stuck to facts, timestamps, witnesses, screenshots, truth. When I finished, I hovered over the button that said Submit. I clicked. The air was cool that morning. Autumn had finally settled in, the kind of dry chill that made Austin mornings feel lighter, even when your chest felt like it weighed 50 pounds. I opened the curtains in my apartment, letting the soft sun pour in as I sipped black coffee that tasted more like burnt memories than comfort. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another passive-aggressive message from Mom or one of Sable's concerned friends who only knew how to weaponize kindness. But when I glanced down, I saw dozens of notifications lighting up my screen like a warning flare. Tags, mentions, DMs. My stomach tightened as I tapped into Instagram. And there it was, Sable's latest move. A long, curated post. Picture perfect. Her in soft lighting, looking up toward the sky, clasping a coffee mug like she was praying. Captioned with, "Some people can't stand seeing you shine." Then, as if that weren't enough, "I never thought my own blood would try to destroy everything I've built. But God has a plan. I choose peace." Peace. She chose peace after publicly accusing me of war. The comments were exactly what I expected. "You're so strong." "Keep going, Queen." "Family can be toxic. Cut the snakes." And others, uglier, meaner, directed at me, about how bitter sisters try to ride coattails, about attention seekers who stage drama for relevance. I hadn't even responded yet, hadn't said a word, but she was already painting the stage and assigning the roles. Hers, the misunderstood radiant leader. Mine, the jealous, broken background character. I set the phone down without reading more. Then it buzzed again. Voicemail. From my mother. I didn't want to listen, but I knew I had to. I needed to know how far she was willing to go this time. I pressed play. Her voice came through the speaker, that slow, careful tone she used when she wanted to seem reasonable. "Layla, this is getting out of hand. You're going too far. Think about your career, your reputation. Think about what people will say when this becomes bigger. You still have time to make this right. But if you keep pushing this, I can't protect you." She paused. "I won't protect you." Click. I stared at the phone, then opened my voice memo app and recorded the message straight from speaker. Saved it, labeled it, Marceline, Threat 10-21. Because at this point, I knew I couldn't trust anyone not to rewrite history. Later that afternoon, I got a message from Taylor, an old college friend I hadn't talked to in months. "Hey, you need to hear this. Sending you a link. Don't shoot the messenger." It was a podcast link. Sable had gone live with one of those cozy, feel-good hosts who specialize in healing trauma and setting boundaries with toxic people. The episode was called When Jealousy Lives in the Family. I didn't want to listen, but I did. In the first 10 minutes, she never used my name, but she didn't have to. "There's someone in my life," Sable said in that soft, breathy voice she always used when she wanted to sound humble, "who's really struggling right now. I have compassion for her, truly. But it's hard when that pain gets turned against you." The host hummed in sympathy. Sable continued, "Sometimes, when you do well, the people you thought loved you can't handle it. They twist your kindness into something ugly. They accuse you of things that never happened, just so they don't have to look at their own unhappiness." I sat frozen, listening to her rewrite everything. No one asked her why someone would fabricate medical records. No one pushed back. Just more praise. "You're so brave for sharing this. You're showing grace in the face of cruelty." The next morning, her follower count jumped by 20,000. Mine stayed at 912. I could have screamed. I could have posted screenshots. I could have written a scathing rebuttal. But instead, I did something different. I opened my laptop, logged into my old blog, one I'd barely touched since grad school. I updated the password, rebranded the page with just my name, and then I wrote, "No name calling, no drama, just facts." I started with the night of the dinner. I described the sequence of events. I attached medical records, redacted but verifiable, a time-stamped photo of my swollen, bruised knee, the official hospital intake form. And then I wrote, carefully, "I have nothing to gain from this truth, but I have everything to lose by staying silent." Silence protects power, not people. I was taught to keep the family's reputation intact, no matter what it cost me. But not anymore. I clicked publish. No hashtags, no filters, just the truth sitting plainly on the screen. I closed the laptop, feeling a strange mix of nausea and calm. The way you feel right before a big storm hits, but after you've boarded up the windows. And then, as if on cue, another ping. New email. Subject, request for interview. The Guardian. I opened it slowly, reading the brief message from a features editor who'd seen the blog and wanted to know if I'd be open to talking more. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stood up, walked to the mirror, and looked at myself. Bruised, still limping, tired, but standing. You wanted a spotlight, Sable, I whispered to my reflection. Let's see what it feels like when the whole world's watching. The email from The Guardian was still sitting unopened in my inbox the next morning when my phone lit up with a new notification, this time from a news app. I almost ignored it. I had grown used to seeing headlines I wanted to avoid, especially when they hinted at anything close to home. But then I saw my name, not just mine, hers too. Exclusive. Security footage contradicts influencer's assault denial, family under fire. I sat up straighter on the couch, heart lurching. I tapped the link. The video had already been embedded by the local station, watermarked and slowed down. There was no audio, thankfully, but the visuals were enough. I watched it unfold, Sable standing from her seat. Her walk toward me, her hand meeting my shoulder with force. The angle made it undeniable, my body twisting as I fell. The awkward, jerking motion of my limbs hitting the floor. My head tilting upward, clearly in pain, and most damning of all, the rest of the room frozen. Watching, not helping, not reacting, not a soul moved. The silence in the footage said more than any audio ever could. And then, as the video ended, came the text overlay. Footage provided anonymously. I stared at the screen. The breath in my lungs stalled. Not leaked, not hacked. Given by someone. Less than 10 minutes later, social media exploded. My phone became useless, an overheated block of buzzing. Comments flooded in from strangers, from acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years, from journalists, advocacy groups, medical professionals. The narrative flipped on its head within hours. She lied to protect her image. Layla deserves justice. This is exactly why victims don't speak up. And finally, we believed you, Sable. That one stung. Because it was true. They had believed her. The narrative she'd built, rehearsed, and launched with precision. But now they saw. I watched her accounts slowly change. The comment sections were first. Filled with fire emojis and heart comments 1 minute, turned off the next. Her publicist released a vague statement about mental health and stepping back. The charity removed her from the event page. By late afternoon, her Instagram went dark. Gone. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in seeing someone crumble publicly, even someone who had pushed me down, physically and emotionally, over and over again. But there was something else I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. It didn't last long. At 6:04 p.m., my phone rang. The caller ID made me freeze. Lawrence. My father. I debated letting it go to voicemail. I almost did. But something in me needed to know. Why now? I answered. Didn't speak. Just listened. There was a pause. Then, it's me. I didn't respond. He took a breath. I know what this cost you. I know I didn't stop it when I should have. Another pause. I couldn't let them erase you again. The words landed like a stone in my gut. You sent it? I asked, not as an accusation, just confirmation. Yes, he said quietly. They don't know. I swallowed hard. My mouth was suddenly dry. Why? Because you were right, he said. And because I couldn't watch it happen again. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from him. Not perfect, not enough to fix years of passivity, but real. We didn't say goodbye. I just ended the call. The silence afterward was different, not heavy, just full. I assumed the family group chat was imploding by now, though I wasn't part of it. I didn't need to be, but I knew what would come next. That night, I got a message from a cousin I barely spoke to. They're having a family meeting without you. No surprise there. I imagined the scene. Mom pacing in the living room, voice clipped, sharp. I told you to keep it clean. Sable, unhinged for once, no script to follow. You told me to win. That's what I did. Mom's hands trembling. Not like this, Sable's voice cracking. You built me to be this. Don't pretend you didn't. Dad silent, standing by the fireplace, watching his creation fracture like porcelain under pressure. They could have the meeting. I had other things to prepare for. The next morning, I woke to an email from my attorney. The complaint had moved forward. A civil hearing date had been set. I opened the calendar to confirm. It stopped me cold. The date? My birthday. I stared at it. Let the irony settle. And then, I smiled, because maybe that was perfect. Maybe the day I was born again shouldn't be about cake and cards. Maybe it should be about reclaiming every part of myself they'd tried to silence. I walked to the mirror, still in pajamas, hair a mess, knee still wrapped in a brace. But standing. Still standing. That works, I whispered. I'm finally being born again. The morning of the hearing was strangely quiet. Not just the world outside, though even the usual clanging of construction a few blocks over had gone silent, but inside me too. My thoughts, usually scattered and fast, moved slowly, deliberately. It wasn't peace I felt. Not really. It was that sharp, breathless stillness that comes just before a needle pierces skin. The knowing that pain is coming, but also the knowing that you're ready for it. I sat in the passenger seat of Denise's car, watching the courthouse emerge from behind a row of trees. Pale gray stone, steps washed with last night's rain. We were early, because I'd insisted on it, not because I was nervous, not because I needed more time to prepare. I'd been preparing for years, but I needed to walk in unrushed. I needed to arrive fully in my body, step by step, not flung forward by urgency. Denise, my attorney, said nothing. She knew better than to fill silence that was doing its own work. I opened the door and stepped into the chill. The wind was gentle but present, the kind that brushes against your neck like a hand checking for a pulse. The parking lot was mostly empty, but at the base of the steps, I saw a small group beginning to gather. Reporters. Two of them I recognized from the local news. One raised her phone when I stepped into view but paused, her hand lowering slightly when our eyes met. She must have seen it. The edge in my gaze, the steadiness. I wasn't here for spectacle. I was here for truth. Inside, the courthouse smelled like every courthouse. Paper, floor wax, and burnt coffee left too long in a pot. No glamour, no majesty, just beige walls, humming fluorescent lights, and the low rustle of people trying to pretend that justice is routine. Sable arrived 10 minutes after me. She walked in flanked by a 3-person entourage, her attorney, a PR rep in designer heels, and a man in slim glasses who kept adjusting her scarf. A stylist, maybe. She looked like someone who had rehearsed every gesture in front of a mirror. She didn't glance at me, but I watched her. The makeup was subtle, neutral. Elegant remorse, if there were such a shade. Her heels clicked too loud across the tile. Her smile was polished, posed, but her hands trembled when she wasn't using them. Her fingers fluttered against the scarf, the tabletop, her phone. And when the judge entered the room, she flinched, barely. But I saw it. The judge was an older woman with steel gray hair pulled into a twist, soft eyes, and a tone that could stop time. I liked her immediately. Authority without arrogance, compassion without performance. We began with motions, opening statements, legal framing. Denise, calm and sharp as ever, spoke without embellishment, just facts, dates, names, clear timelines, everything backed up with documentation, notarized statements, photographs, evidence stacked and labeled with quiet fury. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, walked to the stand. No limp today, though the scar on my knee peeked from beneath the hem of my skirt. A thin line, a permanent one, a silent witness. I sat, was sworn in, then faced the courtroom. No tears, no raised voice. I didn't perform. I told the truth. I spoke of the dinner, the tension, the words thrown like knives across white linen, the push, the sharp edge of the table, the sound I made when I hit the ground. I spoke of the silence afterward. I told them about the hospital, how I drove myself, how no one came, how my mother whispered through clenched teeth that Sable had a future and I had to be quiet because scandals weren't good for scholarships or sponsorships. I explained how my sister used her reach to spin the story before I even got a chance to tell it, how she minimized my pain to protect her brand, how my absence from family photos was rebranded as distance, how the narrative had been edited until I looked ungrateful. I didn't exaggerate, but I didn't hold back either. I ended with this. I didn't come here to destroy anyone. I came because I was destroyed, and I refused to stay buried. The room was silent. Even Sable had stopped fiddling with her scarf. During recess, I stepped into the hallway to catch my breath. The courthouse corridor was dim, colder than the courtroom itself. I leaned against the wall, stared out one of the small windows, and exhaled slowly. That's when I saw him. Theo, I hadn't seen him in months. He looked older, like someone who had spent too long trying to fix something that never wanted to be fixed. He didn't come toward me. He walked straight past me, his eyes flicking to mine only briefly, towards Sable. She was seated on a bench, flanked by her team. He leaned in and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then he stepped back and said clearly and loudly enough for the entire hallway to hear, "You told me it was an accident." Her face paled. She opened her mouth, but he raised his hand, cutting her off before the performance could start. "We're done." Then he walked away. No yelling, no theatrics, just finality. A camera clicked nearby. One of the reporters had caught the moment, and for the first time, Sable looked exposed. Not elegant, not framed, just a person unraveling in real time. Court resumed. The ruling came quickly. The judge spoke with clarity, her words like footsteps across marble. Sable was ordered to pay damages, monetary and emotional. Not a fortune, but enough to be seen, to be acknowledged. A restraining order was granted. 2 hours later, her nonprofit released a statement saying she had voluntarily stepped down from her leadership role. No acknowledgement of why, just distance. I declined the payout. Instead, I asked that it be donated directly to a women's shelter specializing in trauma recovery, a place where women like me wouldn't have to speak 10 times before being believed once. When it was over, I didn't linger. Most of the crowd had cleared. A few reporters waited by the exit, but Denise guided me through a side door. We sat in a quieter hallway, her folders stacked neatly in her lap, while she organized the last details. I took out my phone for the first time that day. One new message, from an unknown number. "Your story gave me the courage to leave. Thank you." No name, no details. But I didn't need any. I leaned back on the bench, inhaled deeply, and looked up through the narrow pane of glass set high in the wall. The sky above the courthouse was overcast, soft gray with no promise of sun, but it was open, and it was mine. 6 months passed without fanfare. No sudden revelations, no grand apologies, just time, doing what it does best, moving forward whether you're ready or not. I'd started sleeping through the night again. Not always, but enough. I still woke up from time to time with flashes of Sable's voice, Marceline's chilling calm, Dad's silence. But the ache didn't control me anymore. It had become background noise, something I could acknowledge without surrendering to. When I was invited to speak at the National Women's Leadership Summit in Houston, I almost declined. I didn't feel like a leader. Survivors rarely do. But the email was kind, and the person who wrote it clearly understood that I hadn't just experienced a fall, I'd stood back up. And that mattered. The event was held in a modest but elegant ballroom. No glitz, no overproduced lights. Just rows of chairs filled with women, Some dressed in tailored suits, others in denim jackets and worn boots. Every single one of them carried stories in their bones. The topic they asked me to speak on was how to hold your truth when no one wants to hear it. I stood behind the podium, not reading from a script. I had notes, sure, but I didn't need them. I spoke from memory, from scar tissue. I told them about the dinner, the push, the words that fell afterward like ice water. I told them about the silence, the kind that isn't peaceful but punishing. And I told them what happened after, the courtroom, the fallout, the rebuilding. But I didn't linger in the pain. I anchored my story in the reclamation. The moment I stopped asking for space and started creating my own. At the end, I looked out over the crowd and said, "Your story doesn't lose power just because they pretend it didn't happen. Speak anyway, even if your voice shakes, even if your hands tremble. Say it for the version of you who stayed quiet too long." They stood, every single one. A woman in the front row, probably in her 70s, reached for my hand as I stepped down. She didn't say much, just mouthed, "Thank you." It was enough. 2 weeks later, I received a plain envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name, handwritten in neat, deliberate strokes. Inside was a letter, short, no flourish. "You were always the one who saw clearly. I'm sorry I stayed quiet so long. Your courage shamed me into action. Dad." I didn't cry. I folded it once, slid it into the drawer with the others I kept, the ones I read when I needed to remember who I was, who I chose to be now. Around that time, a friend sent me a link to a property auction listing. I clicked out of curiosity. It was my childhood home. Foreclosed. Empty. I stared at the listing photo for a long time. The house looked the same on the outside. Red brick, wide porch, 2-story colonial. But something about it felt hollow now, like the energy had shifted, cleared. I made a call. Through a friend's business name, I submitted a silent bid. It was accepted within days. And then, for the first time in my life, I walked into that house with full ownership, not just of the deed, but of my place in the story. I didn't move in. I transformed it. We gutted the kitchen, opened up the back wall into a wide garden space, added a quiet therapy room upstairs, hired counselors, partnered with nonprofits, turned the living room into a resource library. At the front of the property, we hung a small wooden sign, still standing. I didn't put my name anywhere on it. This wasn't about me anymore. People came, slowly at first. Women of all ages, some with kids, some with trauma they hadn't even fully named. They painted, they wrote, they cried, they sat in silence that didn't sting. One day, I was walking through the garden area behind the house when I saw a young woman, barely 20, sitting cross-legged on the grass with a sketch pad in her lap. She looked up when she noticed me. "It's quiet here," she said, smiling gently. I smiled back. "The quiet doesn't hurt anymore." We sat there for a moment, not speaking, just breathing, letting the sun warm our skin, letting the wind pass through without disrupting anything. Later that evening, I sat alone in the old dining room, the same one where I once sat next to the bathroom door, barely part of the family table. The same one where silence was a rule, not a relief. Now it held a circular table, surrounded by mismatched chairs donated from people who'd started over, too. No heirloom china, just sturdy ceramic mugs and conversation. I never heard from Sable again. Someone told me she moved out of state, took up freelance marketing. No spotlight, no stage, just disappeared. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance. We weren't enemies, we weren't sisters either. We were just done. That was enough. For the first time in my life, I had space. To grow, to breathe, to exist, unapologetically. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is speak the truth, especially when your whole life you've been told to stay silent. This wasn't just a story about family betrayal. It was about reclaiming your voice, even when it shakes, and choosing healing over vengeance. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from family to protect your peace? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More true stories, raw, real, and unforgettable, are on the way.